That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The British Constitution provides that taxation and representation shall go together. Therefore, women taxpayers are entitled to vote.
I have a dream today. Let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true.
Hi, welcome to episode 7 of the Only Human Podcast, where we're engaged in a never-ending battle to close the gap between who we are today and who we're capable of becoming in the future. I'm Tonykern, your humble host on this battlefield, and today's skirmish continues our series on how, why, and when we learn things, always with an eye toward getting a little bit better at it, right? A lot of folks get bored when I talk about learning. Heck, a lot of folks get bored when I talk about anything. But I'd like you to keep this one thing in mind as we work through this series. When we get better at learning, we've opened a path where we get better at everything. Remember the Blue Threat proverb we used a couple weeks ago that said you can't uneducate someone who's learned to read? Well, today we're going to talk about something that's very similar. It's another way to learn, but frankly, any way that we can learn to learn is a door that opens into multiple opportunities for us. Keep this in mind. When we learn new ways to learn, we're learning that we can get better at anything and everything that we put our mind to. So learning is critical. Last week, I talked about looking at our education and whether we chose a narrow, deep river or a wide, shallow one. Whether we want to become very knowledgeable in one area or learn a little bit about many areas. Today, I'm going to expand on that by showing you a skill that can magically do both, something called lateral thinking. So let's introduce this with our Blue Threat proverb of the week. It's Blue Threat proverb number 3, life is a mission simulator. We can never forget that the world around us has been and will always be our best classroom. The problem is that we sometimes get too busy doing things to see the little things that we can learn from our daily interactions with it. Or we're too tired, or we are not realizing the opportunity of a small insight to expand into our greater lives. It doesn't have to be that way. And lateral thinking is a way that we can get out of this trap of not learning from our experiences, every experience, and in particular, the small things. So lateral thinking is defined by the dictionary peeps as the solving of problems by an indirect and creative approach, typically through viewing the problem in a new and unusual light. Right? That's the definition from the dictionary. Personally, I think the uses of lateral thinking go well beyond problem solving. At least for me, it's prompted by the tiniest of things that I observe, and it's driven by a curiosity, but more importantly, it's driven by a process. A process of thinking that involves 4 steps. Here they are: observation, inquiry, reflection, and connection. Now we're going to walk through those in a little more detail, but let me say them again with a little expansion here. Observation, we see something, we hear something, we notice something that prompts a question in our head, and that's the second part. It can be an easy question, but I promise you it will probably lead to more questions. Once we begin to get some answers from this thing we've observed and these questions that we've asked, we reflect on it. That's step 3, reflection. We think about what this could mean. We kind of put some things together. And then the last stage, the moneymaker, is connection. We connect it to something that's in the real world in our lives. Now we'll walk through these over the next couple minutes with an example of how this all works, at least how it works in my head, because lateral thinking is very individual. It's very personalized. I sincerely doubt that anybody on this podcast will do it exactly the same way. But if you follow these steps, it'll get you started until you can put your own stamp on it and practice it for a while. So here we go. A few years ago, I was sitting outside with my dogs in Colorado on a lazy summer day. And I noticed, like I'd done 100, maybe 1,000 times before, a line of ants emerging from a hole in my yard, following each other toward who knows where, some unknown location. Now, I was going to learn very quickly that it might be unknown to me, but these guys clearly knew exactly where they were going. So that was the observation step. But for some reason on this day, I asked myself a question that maybe I'd asked before, but never really followed up on. And it was like, I wonder where they're going. So I followed them down the hill, over some rocks, until they finally came up on this big down lodgepole pine tree. It had been blown over in a windstorm or something. And I followed them down, and then they wrapped around underneath it. And it had this big fungus, mushroomy looking thing growing on the bottom of it. And that's where the ants were going. And they were systematically breaking it down, chewing it up, and carrying it along an equally circuitous route back to my yard, where they disappeared down a different hole than the one they'd emerged from. Pretty sophisticated stuff. Now, the routes to and from this mushroomy thing were pretty good distance. I'd guess probably 40 yards as a crow flies or as a human walks, but their route probably double that. Right? And that was really interesting to me. I'm not sure why, and I had to think about it for a while. And as I was thinking about this, the reflection stage, right, it prompted more questions. I wonder how they found this thing. How did they organize to do this pretty sophisticated logistics project with their tiny little ant brains? As I got closer to them, I noticed that they look differently. Why do some ants look differently from other ones? There are a million other questions, but those are the biggies. Obviously, this had turned into something bigger than I wonder where they're going, right? And I was hooked by this time. Ants had started to fascinate me. And it led me to my computer and a quick Wikipedia search. And what I found out was nothing short of amazing. I'm going to share a few things with you here, because this is the process of reflection and connection. So ants form colonies, which is a pretty cool word, right? They range in size from a couple of dozen predator ants living in small natural cavities, hunting and killing and eating, to huge organized colonies that may occupy large territories and consists of tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of individual ants. Right? So they're different sized groupings, and that began to, how do you manage a big group of dumb ants, right? I found that ants have a variety of castes, C-A-S-T-E-S, castes, different levels of their hierarchy. Sterile wingless females, mostly of which were workers, as well as big male soldier ants. Other groups, foragers or scouts, cutters, specially designed to chop up the food into smaller pieces, carriers that pick up those pieces, fertile males called drones that service the one much larger and apparently much smarter ant, certainly much longer lived, a fertile female called a queen. Sometimes big colonies will have more than one queen, and they can live as long as 30 years. 30-year-old ant, I never would have imagined, right? Insects, butterflies live from a few hours to a few days. Queen ant can live up to 30 years. Further, I learned that colonies are described by the people that study them as superorganisms. superorganisms, because the ants appear to operate as a unified entity, collectively working together toward a single goal to support and grow the colony. Made me kind of drift off a little bit and think about the Borg for Star Trek fans. I learned that the biomass of ants on Earth, and I don't know who does this math, exceeds that of all the mammals and birds combined. And that ants have remained relatively unchanged for millions of years. With the exception of Antarctica, they're everywhere on our planet, which prompted another lateral thinking escapade. Why would you name something Antarctica when there aren't any ants there? But we'll leave that one for later. That one's probably not very important. Still curious though. So the success of ants in so many environments appear to result from their social organization that's allowed them to adapt to millions of years of changes in their environment. They can modify their habits. They can tap different resources. They can defend themselves while they're doing it. And this is all pretty intriguing to me. Somewhere in the back of my goofy brain, the word culture popped in. I wrote it down, but I didn't think on it for long because there's a lot more interesting stuff to learn about ants. Like that ants are the only groups apart from mammals that interactive teaching and training has been observed. One example I saw online was a forager ant, a scout, right, that was training a newly hatched nestmate to look for food and find food. And they do it through a process called tandem running. Right? So the newbie ant gets pushed out of the nest by the trainer ant and then pushed till he starts running. And then the leader runs right next to him. And once the pace is set, the leader accelerates out in front of him and zigzags, antenna up, sniffing whatever he does looking for food. If the noob ant falls too far behind, the trainer ant slows down. If the noob ant gets too close, the trainer ant speeds up. So not only are they training them to look for and find food, they're training them to do it as quickly as they possibly can. I mean, that's just super cool stuff for little bugs, right? But that wasn't even the coolest stuff. It gets even better. Ants communicate a whole bunch of different ways: by touch, by sound, by vibration, but most of all, by using pheromones, right? Smelly stuff. Since most ants live on the ground, they use the soil surface to leave pheromone trails, right? Smelly stuff that may be followed by other ants, right? Spit here, next ant will smell it and it means turn left. Spit here, next ant will smell it and it means turn right. This means climb, this means descend, this means you're getting close. All those things have different pheromones, right? And so these trails are then marked to the food, and then the ants that get to the food, the cutters, the carriers, the warriors to protect them all, the foragers are still there, but they're finding a different route back. Think about this, why a different route? Probably to avoid head-on collisions or confusion or something, but a completely different set of pheromones. So this way to the food, different set of smelly stuff this way back from the food. Crazy. But they don't just use pheromones to find food, right? A crushed fire ant, for example, can emit an alarm pheromone that sends every nearby ant, regardless of what type of ant it is, into an attack frenzy. And it brings ants in from further away. Anybody that lives in my neck of the woods, southern US, Texas, knows if you find yourself in the general vicinity of a fire ant nest, you don't want to step on any of them. You just move carefully away. But it gets better. A lot of ant species have something called propaganda pheromones. It's like spy versus spy stuff. The ants are attacking them, and these spy ants will run in and squirt stuff around, and it confuses the enemy ants and makes them fight amongst themselves and kill each other. How cool is that? I mean, who are these guys? Maybe more importantly to you, what does any of this have to do about the topic of our podcast today? We're going to get right back to that in 1 minute, right after a word from our sponsor.
Never events occur with or without negative outcomes. Just because something bad didn't happen doesn't mean a never event didn't occur. I want you to start calling these events out. We're going to hold each other accountable. We're going to make that commitment today that says, hey, that was an improper movement. Why are we doing that? That is not who we are. That's not the way we do things. Because if I can fix that behavior, I can fix that consequence. Because if I don't, those behaviors become normalized and they get taught to the next person and the next person and the next person. Before you know it, it's out of control.
Visit convergentperformance.com and sign up for Aviation Maintenance Never Events, a proven program that can save your company millions of dollars annually.
Okay, welcome back. So far, we've discussed lateral thinking as a learning tool available to anybody that develops as a skill over time. We've talked about the first three steps, right? Observation, I saw the line of ants. Reflection or inquiry, I wonder where they're going. Then reflection, which led to more inquiry. Why are they doing it? How do they do it? All that stuff. But the next and last step is the moneymaker. It's making connections. A few decades ago, I stumbled on a vintage BBC science documentary. Well, it wasn't vintage then, but it's vintage now. Science documentary series called Connections with James Burke. Right? I was immediately hooked, and I devoured every available episode. I'm sure they're all available online digitally now, but I have the old VHS series, and I still have a VHS player, and every once in a while I plug it in. James Burke, Professor James Burke, British guy, kind of wild silver hair, takes us on countless fascinating historical trails and rabbit holes on seemingly unrelated things before arriving at an unexpected final destination. A lot of it's on the science of technology, the science of ideas. And I could talk all day about this show and how it helped develop my fascination with lateral thinking. But our time's limited here today. So Connections with James Burke, definitely worth tracking down online, watching a few episodes. Okay, back to the ants. Remember a few minutes ago I said, when I was looking at all this, the word culture popped into my head as I was learning about the success of ant colonies. So I started to think hard about why that might have jumped in. And I mean, you can already see where this is going for me. I let this noodle around in my head for a few days. I write a lot of stuff down. I create these little mind map things with arrows and all that stuff. And eventually I wrote down the words redundant specialization. Redundant specialization, which I perceive to be the organizational simplicity at the core of the success of ants over tens of millions of years. They had a few basic functions, lots of backup. One ant goes down, next one fills right in behind it. And an absolutely fierce dedication to training and compliance. Compliance to only a few very simple but non-negotiable rules. So at that point, redundant specialization, I began a project to see if I might develop something that would be applicable to human organizations to help them maybe achieve the same ends. Maybe not tens of millions of years of success, but maybe a few years, right? So in this way, I connected the idea from the natural world to the human world, which is really the same world, but you see where I'm going. And over the past decade, I've refined this concept and professionally trained dozens of organizations with this ant colony model of redundant specialization, helping them simplify workflows, reduce the bureaucracy, eliminate internal competition, and generally aligning functional areas with the overall goal to do what the ants did. Follow the same path, do your job, stay out of each other's way, grow and improve the colony. All of this stemmed from a single observation of tiny insects on a lazy summer day on the North Slope of Pikes Peak, Colorado. So that's the lateral thinking journey, but it's just one of them. I mean, at any given time, I've got a whole notebook for these things. What does this mean to me? What can I learn? This is just one example of how powerful the idea of lateral thinking can be to our learning. and maybe to our thinking as well. It's not a natural skill for everybody, but it's available to all of us. Right? Maybe most importantly, lateral thinking is fun. Okay? And when we can learn from having fun, why would we ever stop? Lifelong learning has been proven to improve our mental well-being, our physical health. It adds years to our lifespan. Why would we not want to do this, right? It's such a simple exercise, but the one thing it takes is time. It takes a little bit of effort to get started, but then it's like a big flywheel. Once you start this stuff, you can't really stop. So I'm encouraging you to take the time to try this model, right? To look at the serendipity in the world, the little things that maybe have meaning to you, maybe not, but until you begin to investigate them, you really don't know what they could be revealing to you. Remember, it takes open eyes and an open mind to get something out of the tiniest of lessons in the world. Okay, I guess it's time for some takeaways and to wrap this thing up. Takeaway number one, lateral thinking is the ability to learn from seemingly unrelated things. The world is full of performance secrets, but they don't have to be secrets. Keep your eyes open, keep your mind open, and begin to ask that second step, right? You observe and you wonder why. You observe and you wonder if. The more you get into that observation and inquiry cycle, the more you're going to have to get to step 3, which is reflection. So takeaway number 2 are just the basic 4 steps: observation, inquiry, reflection, and connection. If you're having trouble getting started, just go back, find some small thing, and follow those 4 steps methodically until it becomes natural. And then put your own weird stamp on it, right? One of the Blue Threat proverbs we haven't done yet is Blue Threat proverb number 2, which says everybody's weird. And this is a perfect example of how to apply your weirdness and make it work for you. Takeaway number 3, lateral thinking is free and it's fun, but you can't rush it. Let your mind work through these discoveries at its own pace. As you begin to notice things and ask the questions and pull the information to you, there's a tendency to say, what does it mean? What does all this mean to me? I can't make the connections. Don't try to push it. Your brilliant subconscious will work on these things. If you found an interest in something, it has found an interest as well. And the more patient you are, the more insights will be revealed to you, and the deeper those insights will go. Right? So lateral thinking's free, it's fun, but don't rush it. And finally, step number 4. Lateral thinking is just one more way to become a lifelong learner. And like we mentioned, there are so many benefits from continuing to learn at any age or any stage of your career. The earlier you can get into this, the better, because the more is going to be revealed to you. But this is a pretty cool way, without having to sign up for classes or some other formal education or training program, to become a lifelong learner. So give it a try. Well, that's a wrap on episode 7 of Only Human, where we believe in the power of one. We believe in the power of you and the power of me. To improve our lives where we are with the resources at hand, where we can learn to make the most out of the blessings we've been given, and even the opportunities and challenges that we face, perhaps every opportunity and challenge that we face. Over the next couple of episodes, we're going to have our first guests on Only Human. I'm a little nervous about that, but I'm excited too. We're going to help, these guests help us discover some secrets of mentoring, which sounds boring, but I promise you it won't be, because like everything else here, we're going to go at it from different perspectives, and ... wait for it, parenting. And that one's weird and wonderful too. I've got a guest coming on who is the father of a 5-star football recruit, went to a major university, and we'll tackle that back and forth on how we parent, what we hope for, what we turn over to the kids, what we can learn from them, all those things. So mentoring and parenting coming up. So please tune in for the next couple of episodes. And then we'll have a final episode down the road just a little bit where we're going to wrap all of this learning stuff together into one package. And then we'll move on to our next topic, of which I'm not sure what that will be. I'm starting to get a lot of feedback from my listeners. So if you have an idea, a topic you'd like us to consider here on Only Human, please fire it at us, and we'll be happy to take a look at it because after all, we're all better together when we can think about these things. So thanks for listening, not only to this episode, but to all of them. Thank you for sharing what we're doing. Please tell your friends about it. Share the podcast, follow it. The more that we grow, the more resources we can get to reach more people, which is what we're trying to do here. So once again, it's all designed to help us chart a path to better performance and getting more out of our lives. Thanks for listening. Please keep the feedback coming because after all, I too am only human. See you soon.